When it comes to everything fantasy football, you have to ask one question. Don't you deserve a fighting chance? And now, welcome to Fighting Chance Live with your hosts, Kevin Tompkins and Scott Fishbowl 9 winner, Gary Haddoware.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to Fighting Chance Live. I am Kevin Tompkins, and to the right on the screen, that is Gary Haddoware. Gary, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing wonderful. It's always nice to be here on a Wednesday night.
Absolutely. After the brouhaha that we had last week with Stompy, that was an experience. But we're gonna dial it back a little bit. We're gonna be doing some learning here today. We've got from fantasypoints.com Dr. Edwin Porras. Edwin, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good. I'm excited to find out some more stuff about something that I know nothing about, which is the reality behind history. So why not bring on the doc?
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. And so just as a bit of an intro, just tell us where we can find you on Twitter, what you're doing. I know you just got some big personal news in your life. So how about sharing that with everybody here?
Yeah, so I just, like you said, I just accepted a residency position with Kaiser Permanente, the physical therapy orthopedic residency there. And so I'm excited for that. We're moving across the country. We were talking about before we went live here, and that's going to be a haul from Kansas City to the Sacramento area. So we're getting ready for that. And I guess I should have led with follow me on Twitter, FB Injury Doc, at FB Injury Doc. Sorry, I'm really bad at self-promoting. And then also go to Fantasy Points right now, fantasypoints.com. We have a 30% off sale because of the pandemic that's been going on basically all spring and summer. And I don't know how much longer that's going to last, but you basically can just create an account right now and have all the access for free. If you want to take a look, scroll through Graham Barfield's yards created, you want to go through all Scott Barrett stuff. Whatever your flavor is, if you want to, peruse over to the injury side, maybe you can do that and check out some of my articles. It's all free right now, and you can pre-order a subscription for 30% off. So anyway, awesome. Now we can get to talking, guys.
Well, first off, congratulations.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It means a lot.
That's awesome.
Yeah, if you guys haven't been to fantasypoints.com, what are you waiting for? Because it's it's a who's who of fantasy. You're talking about John Hansen, Joe Dolan, Graham Barfield, Scott Barrett, Greg Cosell, Adam Kaplan. A lot of good, live streams, podcasts, just great articles. A lot of good, projections. You name it, you can find it on there. So.
Yeah, man, they're the dream team, and I just like to say that I'm Christian Laettner. I'm just trying to Christian Laettner my way through it all. That's all I'm doing, trying to Christian Laettner my way through it all.
Absolutely. So, So I just wanted to start off because we're going to be talking about a lot of players who have been down on their luck as far as injuries. And I know from your Twitter, you've been talking about how the phrase injury prone, it's not a thing. So tell us really, I think it's kind of maybe a catch-all, maybe a lazy way to describe somebody as far as, somebody with an injury history. So, go a little more in depth about that.
Yeah, so to try to keep it concise, because I tend to go off the rails with this question. Generally speaking, when I say injury prone is a lie, generally speaking, I'm referring to, like you said, the lazy catch-all. Don't really know what's going on. Don't really know why, but I'm just going to say this player is injury prone because they missed a few games or because they had a big injury or whatever the case may be. So that's from that perspective. That really is a big sweeping sort of a vast majority of people who use that phrase. Is the people who really don't understand what's going on with the player, but they'll use it. The second is this idea of when players go out onto the field and they, are on the field for 4 quarters, sometimes overtime. And the idea that we think in our heads as a general public, I think that, if somebody's going to be injured, that person's going to, they're injury prone. When in reality, there was a study that, and I'll have to find the citation. I should have done that a second ago, but essentially this study found over a period of 4 years, they basically tracked 11 positions. So all 11 positions on the field at all times for every team for 4 years. And I'm going to let you guys guess. You might've seen the tweet by now. but I'm going to let you guess what percentage of those games over those 4 years for every NFL team from 2010 to 2014, what percentage of those games were documented as injury-free?
Ooh.
Injury-free.
I'm going to go single digits. I'm going to go, probably 8 or 9%.
I can't, 5%.
It was 2.3% of those games were injury-free. Then you consider the dudes who, unfortunately, right, I don't promote this. I don't say it's the best thing in the world. You think about the guys who, maybe dislocated a finger, or maybe they felt a little woozy after a hit. They're not going to say anything, right? Especially the guys at the bottom of the chain, right? The foot soldiers who are just on kickoff return or something. They're not going to say a word. And you have to, once you consider those, I'd be willing to bet. I mean, obviously you can't ever say never, but I'd be willing to bet that number's a lot closer to 0 than we even think it is. Yeah. So that's the second reason that I'm saying, I don't know why when we do some high risk activities, for example, if you go and drive down the freeway at 75 miles per hour and you get in an accident, if I hurt myself, doing that, nobody's going to look at me and say, man, you sure are injury prone, right? You on that car, you just are injury prone. That's a high risk activity. People understand that. But for whatever reason, when the people put on, helmet and shoulder pads, all of a sudden, it's an anomaly to be injured, when in reality, that's not reality. So those are the main reasons. What I mean, are there dudes who are injured more often than not because of specific patterns? Yeah. I mean, that tends to happen, but a lot of guys are just really unlucky too. And that's my job, is to try to communicate and decipher which is which.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into a lot of that today, but obviously we're living in a pandemic right now with COVID-19. So I wanted to ask you, Edwin, what does COVID-19, how does that play into maybe people that are players rehabbing, or any physical therapy or anything like that? How does that factor into any kind of regimens? I know with a lot of places, there's not a lot of, people are home, so maybe they're doing Zoom meetings and stuff like that. What kind of factor does COVID-19 play when it comes to injury recovery and things like that?
Sorry, I muted my mic there. I didn't want to be too loud. So that's a good question, right? And the answer is a little bit of we don't know, but there's also some we do know. So there's a ton of research coming out by Gabbett and over the last 10 years that he's put out that talks about workloads, right? So when you ask, is there, could rehab be disrupted? Yeah, rehab could be disrupted, but what I think of when I think of, delayed training camp or shortened preseason or changes in workload, and then you also consider, they're not going to have whatever OTAs, and they're not going to have, voluntary activities. They're going to have any of those things. So these veterans are really, really throwing their workloads off, the workloads that their bodies have grown accustomed to. And so this research, coming back to the research of what I was mentioning, is that research shows that if you have big spikes or big dips in workloads too quickly, then that can lead to about a 3 to 4% chance. And the numbers are a little fuzzy, but it's about 3 to 4% higher chance of getting a hamstring injury, a groin strain, or rolling your ankle, things like that, because your body just is not accustomed to that spike, or it's become accustomed to a lower level of activity, which with the quarantine very well could have happened, because it's a lot easier to just, not do your workout for the day when nobody else is around and you're home and you really don't want to do it. Right. So
that's no accountability. And
so those are the things that I think about, how the pandemic might affect the injuries in that sense.
So does that mean, I always hear the idea that if someone's going to hold out and they hold out of training camp, that they're at a higher risk of getting injured when the season does start. Do you think that statement is true?
I think that statement is reasonable. But how we get there, I think, is a little different. So if a guy comes back and, let's say last year, it didn't happen, so we're in the clear. Let's say last year Zeke, right, would have torn his ACL getting tackled, last year. Well, that probably wouldn't have had anything to do with the fact that he held out until week 1, basically, because he was going to get hit in that way. It doesn't matter how much workload he was under at that point. Now, if you flip it, since 72% of ACL injuries are non-contact in nature, If he would have had for an ACL tear, or if he would have had even a hamstring strain, something a little less severe, then you probably could look at that. You could look at that and reasonably say, that probably had something to do with his workloads at that point, because that's essentially what you're looking at. And even if you don't get down to the granular level of, okay, this much workload over 3 weeks and this much over 2 weeks and what percentages and blah, blah, blah. I think just the general idea of the research is showing is that, hey, give yourself a ramp up period. Yeah. Don't do too much too quickly. And if you're a couch potato, don't go out and try to run a marathon. And that makes sense, right? That's we almost just quantified what we already knew. So that's how the perspective that I take it from.
Yeah, no worries. I'm not going to be doing any marathons anytime soon.
Yeah, no, trust me either.
Oh man. So last week we, heard about Deebo Samuel and his Jones fracture. That's going to certainly take him down. My rankings, I already took him down. I think he's in the low 40s right now. Just based on a lot of stuff that I'm reading and stuff, your article on Fantasy Points about Deebo Samuel and the propensity of re-injury with the Jones fracture coming back maybe too soon, if he gets to a certain threshold. So as far as the projection of him coming back, I've seen a lot of, 6 to 10, 8 to 12 weeks. We were drafting him as kind of that wide receiver too with upside. What do you think is a realistic timeline with a Jones fracture? Do you think that we should be fading him even more in fantasy, or do you think it's prudent to maybe get him out there at the end of that timeline and he'll be just fine?
So it's definitely something that is touch and go. So I think that there's a lot of confusion because there are a few of us fantasy football docs, right? And we're all sort of saying different things, but we were all referring to a timeline, and we all sort of gave different timelines. But the reference point is that there's a difference between when the research says it's safe to start ramping up and when a player will actually come back and be game ready and play. So those were the two. I think that I had a few people who were sort of saying, well, that's not what, this person said or that person said. And it's frustrating because I did a bad job of communicating. So it looks like we're all at odds, but all of us were basically saying the same things, that the research shows with these specific types of fractures, the 10-week mark, for whatever reason, seems to be magically the time where players tend to come back and they don't have a dip in production, right? So I think it's like a 50% dip in production if they come back before 9 weeks. And then it's like a 25% or something like that refracture rate if they come back before the 10 weeks. If they come back after the 10 weeks, then those numbers plummet, and they actually have an increase in production, which is probably a little bit of an anomaly, like a statistical anomaly. But the point remains that they don't see a drop in production. So that's what I wanted to sort of clarify first, because that there's a difference between what San Francisco will do and there's a difference between what San Francisco should do. Yeah. And it's all going to depend in the middle on how Deebo Samuel progresses through rehab, how his CT looks, because a lot of times it's called a non-union. A lot of times they won't close back together and they don't actually heal fully. And so then, you run into the problem of, well, this isn't healed. It's been however many weeks. What are we going to do? And then the flip side is true. Sometimes they heal and there's a union there and it looks great. And then guys will still refracture. So It's a really, really touchy subject. So I would say that Deebo is probably going to wait at least the 10 weeks. I would say it's prudent to wait at least the 10 weeks. And then you might see him start ramping up his activity for another 2 or 3 weeks. So, that's the timeline I would plan for. And that's honestly ideal. But overall, that's quantitatively what we're looking at. From a qualitative perspective, it's a really, really volatile situation. So there's quite a bit of risk attached to it.
So that gets us right to the beginning of the season, pretty much would be week 10, I believe.
Yeah, August 27th is what I looked at from the 10 weeks. So he might, if they still go on with the same schedule, then theoretically, he could be back by week 1. But it just depends on how he feels. It depends on what his CT looks like and everything like that.
Well, I'm thinking like that's probably where based on what you just said, that at the 10-week mark, whereas at least the earliest time where they're going to say, okay, let's try and go full out and let's get back up to speed. So maybe hold them out week 1. They have a really easy schedule because the Niners are like the best team in the NFL anyway. Oh man, you live in Kansas City, damn it.
I do. I was going to say something. I let it go. I'm just going to let you keep talking. It was a good night.
But yeah, I mean, like they do have a relatively soft schedule for the opening, so it'll be interesting to see if they do bring it back. I think it's the Jets, Giants, or it's Cardinals, Jets, Giants, something like that. The Cardinals won't be easy, but the other two should be.
Oh, if I could say one more thing too about it is we'll know pretty quickly. So he's probably, if he hasn't already, he'll be placed on the active PUP list, the physically unable to perform, right? And then so you have to do that with the player that you want to sort of reserve him and reserve the right to put him on the reserve PUP, which would mean, if he goes to the reserve PUP, he can't play the first 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
Right. But you can't use the reserve PUP unless they were on the active PUP. Okay. So if you see that he goes to the reserve PUP, then, that's a bad sign. But if he gets to be, August 27th, August 28th, August 29th, he's still not on the reserve PUP. That's, that's a pretty good sign.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely. So we'll stick with wide receivers here. So a couple that I kind of lumped in together because they're a little bit older. They're not the same type of receiver, but they're going as far as ADP they're going probably around maybe less depending. AJ Green and T.Y. Hilton. So with Green, he hasn't played an NFL game since week 12 of 2018. He had a severe ankle injury. Right now he's going in about PPR 6th round, give or take. And then you got T.Y. Hilton. He's, I believe it was 7 months removed. He had a 3 centimeter, easy for me to say, calf tear. He's still going about the 5th round on average. So knowing those two injuries, knowing they're both veteran receivers, they're not 24, 25-year-old guys. With those injuries, who would you maybe take the bet on? Would you give that to AJ Green with more time with that ankle injury, or would you give that to T.Y. Hilton? Who would you feel more comfortable with?
Man, you're really backing me in a corner here with these guys. So the thing about T.Y. Hilton is he is slowly aging, and we're seeing it right before our eyes. Yeah. I think he went from playing 16 games a couple years in a row, and then it was like 15, and then it was like 12, and then it was like 13. So he's 30 years old.
Whoa. I thought that you froze too because you didn't move.
Nope. I was waiting.
Looks like Edwin is frozen.
Oh, there he is. Oh, we got him back.
Sorry. When did I cut off?
He's slowly aging. He missed T.Y. Hilton missed 15, 12, 13.
Yeah. So anyway, essentially what I'm saying is that calf tear is not necessarily a surprise at his age, and it's not necessarily going to go away. We don't really necessarily have any evidence that shows us that it's going to get better. Things will get better for him. If one muscle fails, then sometimes another muscle will fail. It's not uncommon. You saw it with Will Fuller, who had hamstring injuries, and then out of nowhere, boom, groin strain, right? And then, you see a lot of different examples of it a lot of different times. So like Mike Evans, I think he had a groin strain early on in his career, and then now he had a hamstring. So those things, they're all sort of interrelated sometimes. And so for T.Y. Hilton, I'm really, really watching him closely this year. And it depends. I think that AJ Green's, I'm gonna assume AJ Green's ADP is lower than T.Y. Hilton's.
Yeah, by about a round.
Okay. Man, that's not even a lot. That's crazy. Right. I probably honestly would wait if that were the case. If it were me for my team, if I had to pick between those two dudes, I'd probably just wait and then pick up AJ Green, because I think that AJ Green still has something left in the tank. But at the same time, I'm not trusting him to be my full blown, wide receiver one. Old, AJ Green of old. AJ Green's 32, right? I think the only older receivers older than AJ Green are Julian Edelman. I don't even think Julio Jones is older than him.
Ted Ginn, I think too.
Ted Ginn and Danny Amendola. And that's it. Like other than that, like fantasy relevant, those are the only dudes older than AJ Green.
Right.
But I'm not expecting either of those dudes to be, stalwart wide receiver 1 or 2s. But if I can pick them up and they, slide them in the flex every now and then, yeah, I'm totally happy with that. And I'd probably be more willing to do that with AJ Green just because of that round difference.
Yeah, I haven't touched T.Y. Hilton, honestly. Just I don't want him at his ADP because there's so many good. I mean, that 4th and 5th round for receivers, I've done a lot of best balls, and I'm seeing, you're seeing Robert Woods, you're seeing EJ Chark, you're seeing
why is he always so low, Robert Woods?
Dude, you're talking to the King Truther here of Robert Woods. I got a jersey on the way. The new jersey, so I'm sporting that here. But yeah, I honestly don't get it. But yeah, I have no problem taking a chance on AJ Green because he's got the new distributor now with Joe Burrow. He's still got that athleticism, that big frame. He's going to be invaluable if he can stay on the field for Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Whereas T.Y. Hilton, a lot's been said about him being maybe that Keenan Allen type. Maybe more of a possession guy now that he's not going to be, running 9s like he was in his early career. So, I'd probably lean toward AJ Green. What about you, Gary?
Yeah, I think I'm probably leaning towards AJ Green. He just, to me, has a better pedigree anyway. And I don't know. I like the weapons that are around T.Y. Hilton, and I think that he'll be used in a specific role rather than being kind of the jack of all trades that I felt like he had been before. And so with AJ, that my biggest concern is just because of Joe Burrow. It's a rookie quarterback and what he's actually going to be able to do with that. But ultimately, AJ Green's a year removed? That was preseason last year when he break his ankle. Am I saying that's right?
He had a reconstruction of it. It sounds like, which essentially just means he either completely just at once tore the ligament on the side of his ankle, the one that holds it and prevents it from tilting, or he had just constant sprains all the time and it finally gave out on him. But yeah, he had a reconstruction of that ankle, which is a massive procedure.
So with the reconstruction then, if it was, let's say he was just having sprains before, because I mean, AJ Green, was known as somebody that kind of had the injury prone label, even if it was falsely applied to him. And do you think that this is the type of thing that could actually, in the long run, actually benefit?
He could actually. There's research on the outcomes of that specific surgery, and there actually is no difference in production. Cool. But again, AJ Green's 32. He's had all these other injuries. Yeah, he's one of those guys that again has a lot of question marks around him, and I'm not necessarily trusting him to stay healthy, but he does have a chance. But again, honestly, it's not even the ankle that concerns me. It's the hamstring issues that he had, even the season and 2 leading up to that, those don't go away.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think where he's going, if he ends up actually in the 6th round, there are enough wide receivers that you can kind of also get after him such that to me, it's weird to say that he's a flyer, but I think he's worth a flyer because of his upside, because what we've seen him do and being so consistent. And I will be surprised if he actually goes in the 6th, just because people will be like, oh, that guy was injured last year. Like when you're looking at your 2019 stats, you don't see AJ Green. Therefore, he kind of just gets kicked out of people's heads. So,
yeah.
Okay, I was just going to move us on to Deshaun Jackson. Just go with another nice old wide receiver. Older.
Yeah, geriatric tier.
I mean, he was awesome when he played. He played his one game. He was a wide receiver 1 on week 1 of 2018. And then, he had his abdominal strain that ended up when he returned. He then had an abdominal tear. That sounds absolutely terrifying to me. So just first off, from the abdominal side, from the actual injury, what's your view of that going into the 2020 season?
Yeah, I think that's actually going to resolve it's called athletic pubalgia, where the groin muscles, you have like 20 muscles that attach to your groin, where essentially one of them or multiple of them, whatever structures they tear. And the surgery for that is really successful. And you don't see a dip in production the year coming off the surgery. So another dude coming off of that is Odell Beckham Jr. He's coming off that. Gosh, there's somebody else who had Calvin Ridley. He's coming off that. So there are a couple guys. Deontay Johnson had it. It's pretty common. It's really common injury. So I don't expect necessarily a dip. And considering his role, the role that Deshaun Jackson plays, where it's like, dude, just beat that corner, just go, just do it. Yeah. I think that he can still do that a few times during the season. And he's one of those guys that so he's like him and Ted Ginn, right? I remember this was like 5 years ago. We had I was in a league where I was in the semifinals, and we did 2-week playoffs. Yeah. I don't know what happened. I don't remember the situation. I was down by like 25 or something. And then the Monday night game was whoever Ted Ginn was playing for at that point. And I was like, I mean, I'm going to lose either way. Like I could either start I think it was like Chris Ivory or something. I could either start Chris Ivory at that point, who's declining, or I can just take a flyer here with Ginn. And I put Ginn in. He scored like 33 points or something. So it's like I won that week. It was great. So I think Deshaun Jackson can still play that role. And I don't really see a health being a problem with him from that perspective.
And with that, I mean, that's also tied to Alshon, right? Alshon has Liz Frank's injury. And now they're talking about whether or not there's even going to be a time frame. And so if Alshon isn't even going to come back, like Deshaun, to me, is one of the best wide receiver values, because all else he has are 2 tight ends and then a rookie and multiple rookies, or his mini me and Marquise Goodwin. So when it comes to the Liz Frank injury with Alshon, do you think that he'll be back this year?
I think he'll be back. I don't know. I think it's going to be a while. I think he'll probably start on the reserve pup. There's a chance he may. I'm not saying he will. I think there's a chance he starts on the reserve pup. And when he does come back, I can't imagine a scenario where he just has a resurgence, right? The average, even dudes that athletic don't come back from this surgery and do well. I mean, there's research that shows essentially like that there's about a 20% dip in production for dudes coming off the surgery. And so you think about that, and then you think about how he's another geriatric. I think he's 31 or 32 or 30 or 31. That's considered old for, these guys at their elite level. So I don't have a lot of confidence in Alshon. And then with basically rookie receivers, right? That's his only other competition is a rookie receiver. I mean, maybe you mentioned Marquise. Oh, gosh, is it Lee, right?
Goodwin.
Marquise Goodwin.
Lee is on the Patriots. Marquise Goodwin.
Right. So, I mean, he can't stay on the field either. So I could definitely see a scenario where Deshaun has to be, the de facto wide receiver one, give Sunday to Sunday.
Yeah, I really like Deshaun this year. I will say that's somebody especially in best ball, I really like to try and pair Will Fuller and Deshaun Jackson, because however many weeks you're going to get from each of them, you're probably going to have a very awesome week.
Right. Week winning. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we went from we were talking about the abdominal injury being common. Something I would say is very uncommon was what happened to Tua last year at Alabama with his hip fracture and dislocation. So as far as he was taken off a lot of draft boards by some teams, Miami scooped him up at number 5 overall. How do you foresee Miami using Tua? Do you think they should kind of maybe redshirt him? Or because they have Ryan Fitzpatrick, they're not just throwing any old guy out there and letting him play 16 games? Or do you think Tua sees time maybe in the second half of 2020?
I think there's a difference between what maybe teams should do versus what they will do. I can definitely see, especially with Brian Flores' sort of aggressive approach with everything he does. I think that we might see Tua towards the second half of the season. It's going to be a year since that whole dislocation fracture situation happened. I think it was in November, the first week of November. And so, the longer you wait, it's not so much that his hip isn't healed by now. It's just that his hip is still, bones take a crazy long time to heal, especially a weight-bearing joint like that has to be doing dynamic, athletic, elite level, professional level movements. That's going to take a lot of rehab, a lot of recovery, even outside of just the acute, take care of it, protect it, make sure it doesn't re-injure. The muscles around it have to get built back up as well. All of those things matter. And I think that the longer that he can rehab and do the strength and conditioning regimen that's been set aside for him, the better off he'll be. I'm not necessarily saying that he'll have a decrease in performance because there's just no research on it. But I think the longer that he trains and the longer he can, get reps in practice, the better off he'll be overall.
And it makes sense. I mean, I love the Dolphins. I love what they're doing. I love what they're building. I've been saying this all year. And when you don't believe, most people don't believe that they're a playoff team. Like, what's the need to do this? And if I'm a big proponent of the idea of, like, if you have a rookie and you have Fitzpatrick, who knows more about the NFL than any active player because he's played on half the teams, like, learn from this guy. Right. He knows how QB rooms work. Like, I know it sounds like a joke, but like, I think
I agree.
A lot to be said as to how to learn from people.
Hey, did you know he went to Harvard?
Like, I hate comparing.
Antonio Gates played basketball,
like with Rodgers and Mahomes, but like they sat and they learned, and like they're not comparable per se, but I think that a lot goes for learning how to be a professional, because you can have all the skills in the world, but that doesn't mean you know how to read NFL defenses. You know how to pick up what Brian Flores' defense is, or not defense, but to pick up the offense and figure out how to make adjustments at the line and whatnot. So see what Fitzpatrick does. Like, hell, see what Fitzpatrick does wrong, because let's be honest, he's not a perfect quarterback.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
I completely agree with that. I think there's something to be said for that, definitely. And I think the more likely a guy is to be around that situation, the better. Did you see that? So Patrick Mahomes, this is going off topic a little bit, but he was on the barbershop, I think it was, with LeBron. And they were talking to him, and he was like, yeah, man, I didn't even learn to start reading defenses last year until he was referring to the Super Bowl year. So 2019, he's like, I didn't even really learn how to start reading defenses until week 13 or 14. He's like, I was just kind of going out there. And it's like, I was following the game plan, but I didn't really know how to read them. And I said, how did that go? How did that not like air on ESPN? Like, what?
Right.
Patrick Mahomes just told us he didn't know how to read defenses. What is going to happen in 2020? Like, what is going on here? I mean, who knows how true that is, right? But if that's even half true, holy cow. I'm not even really a KC fan, to be honest with you. Like, I'm really not. I didn't grow up in the area, but I was just that you said Patrick Mahomes and how he sat behind Alex Smith, and that's what I thought.
Kevin, you got to find that clip. You got to post it on Twitter, and you're totally going to get CMC at the 102 and Scott Fish.
Dude, I want it so bad. Well, it's him or Barkley. I hope a certain someone at 101's not paying attention to this. Maybe it's smoke screen. But yeah, so going to another quarterback who right now finds himself without a team, and that's Cam Newton. So well-documented injury past that he's had the last few years, 2 shoulder surgeries. And he had surgery this past December to repair a Liz Frank of his own. So right now with COVID-19, people aren't able to go maybe see him work out. And, we had him maybe going to the Chargers before they drafted Herbert, maybe the Steelers, teams like that, maybe the Saints. I think that was Gary's big thing, was him going to the Saints. But what do you think as far as his progress with that Liz Frank? And do you see him? Do you see a team daring enough to sign him? There's not a lot of openings, but he said he is willing to be a backup.
I think that if I'm being honest, I think that this has nothing to do with his injury. I think teams don't like Cam Newton, and we don't have to get into the whatever. Why, you can use the excuse that because he's whatever, confident, cocky, you can say whatever you want. Cam Newton is a good quarterback, and Cam Newton's healthy. His shoulder wasn't the issue before he got, before he was out. So that had been rehabbed. The foot issue, he was, who knows how much he's played into, but he was lying to the medical staff. Oh yeah, I feel fine. It's whatever. And then, then we saw what happened. So it's been, more than enough time. Especially by week 1, that Liz Frank, gosh, I didn't even look when he would have had that Liz Frank surgery, but I feel like it was a while. It's been a while since he had it. Yeah. So it's going to be plenty of time. And I saw that he was doing some pretty dynamic. Usually I take a lot of like those workout videos, I don't take them too seriously. If anything, it sort of paints with a broad brush, lets me know, oh, he's in this phase or that phase. And I mean, he was doing some pretty high level stuff, dynamic stuff. And a quarterback doesn't really need to be, he can still be successful is what I'm saying. But I think from a health perspective, I don't get it, right? I mean, people are talking about, is Alex Smith going to play? Is somebody going to sign Alex Smith? I mean, Joe Flacco got signed for Pete's sake. Joe Flacco's coming off a disectomy where they literally took part of his disc in his neck out, which has this isn't even opinion. It objectively has bad outcomes. Players have bad outcomes after that, and they're not the same player.
You have to turn your neck to be a QB.
What's that? Say, oh yeah, right.
You have to actually turn your neck.
Anyway, you sort of get what I'm saying, right? Like how does that dude sign with a team and Cam Newton doesn't? I don't know. It's just interesting to me.
I completely agree. And I'm sorry, Cam Newton is like probably my most owned player across Dynasty and everything. And I've like traded for him in the offseason because I'm like, he's going somewhere. I just can't, I just don't understand a world where he doesn't. So where do you, just like disregarding the injury stuff, like where do you think he might go?
Yeah, that's a good question too.
You're smarter than me, so I have to ask.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say I'm smarter than you. I think that, man, I mean, it's going to be one of those things that, it's going to be a team, and I can't even think of a team off the top of my head that's in this situation. But like when the Eagles when the Eagles subbed in 40-year-old Josh McCown, who was, the week before was coaching high school kids, I think it's going to be one of those teams that ends up signing him, week 5 or 6, or maybe even week 11 or 12. It's going to be somebody that finally says, okay, at least we have the security blanket of knowing that this has been a Pro Bowl caliber, Super Bowl caliber, quarterback that we can have waiting in the wings if we need him.
Like,
but I couldn't tell you which team.
What's that? Or who knows with like Sam Bradford too, like that happened with the Vikings and Eagles too. It could be someone gets hurt, in an abbreviated training camp if that's what ends up happening. So yeah, well, I'm just gonna say this. My favorite workout video of all time, and I don't really go peruse them, that Emmanuel Sanders one from last year. That's my favorite one.
Which one are you talking about?
The one where he's coming off his ACL and doing sprints. I believe it was around this time last year.
It was 10 months after he. It was his Achilles.
So yeah, that was cool. He so okay. I don't want to like pour water on anything. But when that happened, right? So it was like really making the rounds, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let's take a look. And then I sort of backtracked it, and he was. I mean, it was impressive, no doubt. Or I'm not going to say I couldn't do what he was doing, right? But he was right on track to where he was supposed to be at that time. I'm not saying I could have predicted he'd be there or anything, but I think it was a little overblown. Maybe I like Emmanuel Sanders though, when he was yelling at the rookie wide receivers and telling them how they needed to get their stuff together. And he was telling them, do this and do that. And why did you do that? And he's just getting in their grill. I like that Emmanuel Sanders video. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
All right. One final QB here. And, going back to the aged quarterback, we got Ben Roethlisberger and his Tommy John surgery that he had after, was it week 2? Yeah, in week 2 it happened.
Yep.
So I don't know much about Tommy John surgeries just because, one, I don't follow baseball much, and it's primarily a baseball injury, if I'm right in saying that. So are you hesitant for him? Like, do you think that this is something where he's still going to be recovering when the season starts?
So I was looking at this, and I was talking to Matthew Betts from Fantasy. Oh gosh, geez, why are the bloods blanking?
The red shirts, I believe.
He's at red shirts, and then also
the footballers.
Footballers, thank you. So I was talking to him, and we were both sort of scratching our heads. Like, it didn't seem like, based off the reports, that he actually had that specific Tommy John surgery. It looked like he had a little bit of a different procedure, and that one doesn't have as much research behind it, but that people tend to come back a little bit earlier. And I think that's what they did with him. Now, the downside to that is he comes back a little bit earlier, and he should be ready by week 1-ish, based off of that timeline, even based off the Tommy John timeline, because it's just a different rehab for quarterbacks versus pitchers. But I think he should be ready. But overall, the big picture is that, he's 38 years old. He just had a massive ligament tear. That shows basically his age, right? It sort of gives away his age. Those are things that Drew Brees, we saw the same thing with Drew Brees, right? These guys are just these overuse injuries, and they're 38, 40 years old. And it happens, right? It just happens after years and years of doing that. So from like a general health perspective, I'm probably more concerned as opposed to like the elbow. The elbow does concern me a little bit because I think they did a different procedure with a little bit worse outcomes. But I do think he'll be ready at least the first quarter of the season, if not before that. But I'm really just more concerned with his general overall conditioning, because we all know what Big Ben looked like once he bulked up, right? I think week 5 or 6 on the sideline, he was looking like a big boy.
Eddie Lacy of quarterbacks.
Yeah, right.
Don't you disparage Eddie Lacy.
But we'll go with Kelvin Benjamin.
But yeah, so as far as the Steelers and their personnel moves, though, you have to think that they're feeling pretty good considering they didn't go out and sign anybody. Though they're still content with Mason Rudolph. They're still, for some reason, content with Devlin Hodges as their 3. But yeah, I would say maybe that's a vote of confidence.
The worst quarterback situation last year in like modern history.
Yes,
so bad.
Yeah,
and they didn't sign Jameis or Cam. Like,
oh my god, the fact that they even won like 7 or 8 games, they were in the playoff hunt until like week 14 or 15, weren't they?
That's probably Tomlin's best coaching job.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Is Tomlin? Man, I wonder how many hours he slept last year.
Probably single digits.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as far we got through the quarterbacks, but now we got a couple running backs to finish us out here, and we're gonna go with the Seattle backfield. So definitely a lot of injuries to go through here with Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. So Chris Carson, he ended his season in week 16, the end of it, with a broken hip, and then a few weeks earlier, Rashad Penny tore his ACL. With a broken hip like that, do you think that Carson's going to be week 1 good to go? I kind of forecasted that. I think would think Rashad Penny maybe has a good chance of getting onto the PUP list there. So what do you think as far as that Seattle backfield? Do you think the signing of Carlos Hyde, is maybe a tell on how they feel those guys are progressing?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. And it's one of those things that you have to consider. That's like the most. I'm not touching that backfield. I think I'm just going to sort of let it be. Maybe if Carson falls to me, I'll take a shot. But I mean, Rashad Penny is coming off an ACL and likely a meniscus. That's from everything that sort of it sounds like he had a meniscus issue that really delays rehab, because players have to basically can't do much of anything in terms of putting weight on their foot and things like that, because the meniscus and they can't bend their knee. So the meniscus has to heal first. Then they can start their ACL rehab. Okay. So that really backs the timeline up. So, that's even half the season. He might not even, be back by the first half. And once they do come back, those multi-ligament injuries are really hard on the body. So who knows how he'll even perform when he comes back. Chris Carson, you mentioned his hip. I mean, that's one of those things that it's just, there's no research on it. There's no data. So even though he could be, he could come back and be fine and perform fine, we don't know the exact number on, the refracture rate or what are the re-injury rate or anything like that. So all in all, I just don't want this in the Atlanta backfield. I don't want any part of.
Man, you're crushing my soul right now. Chris Carson's like my go-to value at running back. I'm just like, I mean, if he plays, the workload is going to be there. I've been saying recently, like maybe I'm really discounting too much, like his hip injury, but I don't know.
And I don't want to say that it is objectively a risk. I'm saying there's no data to point that it is or it isn't, right? So you sort of can meet in the middle there and decide on what your risk tolerance is. I mean, if you're a go-getter, if you're the dude taking Lamar Jackson in the 2nd round, you're probably going to take Chris Carson in the 4th or 5th. So,
right.
With Penny, because I find like sometimes he's just there in like the 18th, 19th rounds of drafts. Like it's insane how late he goes. And I've thought, okay, he'll probably be on the PUP. Then it's, will he be back week 7? Do you think it's, let's just say week 9? Because I want to say week 10, but I feel like that's kind of where I think the answer is. But week 9 over or under for Penny. And it actually goes with Alshon too, because I wanted to say this. They're both obviously playoff teams, or they should be playoff teams. And so they seem like the type of players that the coaching staff would say, no, let's go reserve PUP. You're going to miss the first 6. And then it's a matter of, I think they have to be activated by like 10, 11, or 12, I think, to play the rest of the season.
So I think that it's active PUP, reserve PUP. And if they get changed from reserve PUP to IR, then it actually gets pushed back to 8 weeks. So if they push him back before the season starts from reserve pup to, well, both of them, reserve pup to IR, then it's going to be at least 8 weeks.
Okay.
So I'd be for Penny, I'll say under. For Alshon, I'll say, shoot, man, I'll probably say under 2, but I mean, it's close. Yeah. I think that there's a chance that they miss a big chunk of the season. I think there's more of a chance that Alshon will miss a big chunk of this half of the season compared to Penny. Sorry, that was really a brain buster for me there.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, that gives me a little bit of hope for all my Penny shares that I have all over the place.
Right. Yeah. For the record, I'm in on Jalen Reagor. I'm in on both tight ends. I'm not touching Alshon Jeffrey anywhere. I have no interest in Alshon Jeffrey anywhere, at least for this year. I've seen him, and then you got a guy like Penny who I've seen just go undrafted in, 20 round best balls, and just not sure. But I'm gonna let somebody else take the risk.
Well, that's the thing too. I mean, there's like virtually zero risk if you're literally picking him off the waivers, right? I mean, right. The thing with Penny isn't so much, can he come back and will he perform? He does. I mean, he's going to come back. It's just a matter of like, what will that backfield look like by the time he does come back? And that's almost impossible to predict.
Yeah, I think I believe he had 120 yards or something like that the week before he got hurt.
He was really coming along.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. He was looking really great. I think that was the height of the Chris Carson fumble doghouse at that time. So
the annual tradition, unlike any other, the Chris Carson fumble doghouse.
I need a Jim Nantz soundbite. I'm gonna work on that for next week. But yeah, and Gary, you wanted to talk. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm skipping ahead here. Let's talk about everybody's favorite 6th, 7th round value running back, Darius Geis.
Yeah.
What can we say? Because we had a torn ACL in the 2018 preseason. We had a meniscus injury last year, and then he came back, and then he had an MCL injury on that same leg. And they have, how many running backs they have? 1,000 right now. If they were so confident in Darius Geis, they wouldn't have the corpse of Peyton Barber on their roster right now. So
that's right. And then they drafted Bryce Love.
Yeah, and now they have whatever you want to call him, Antonio Gibson, and
right.
Yeah, and then Adrian Peterson, and everybody. Anyway, I'm going off. So it seems high to me, but I'm willing to bet on the talent for Geis. Now, you think there's just too many red flags to overcome for Darius Geis? Do you think we're seeing a pattern with these injuries? Do you think it's just bad luck? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so he's running bad luck, man. He's like the king of bad luck. But now, unfortunately, it's a pattern, right? So luck got him there. Bad luck got him where he's at. But now it's something that you have to deal with. And the reality is he had a meniscectomy, and there's research that shows players who come back from that 1 year after. So Kerryon Johnson is an example. He had a meniscectomy recently this offseason. Players that come back from that, they see fewer snaps. Players, they start fewer games, and they play fewer games. So all of those things wrapped into one. You're already starting to see the beginnings of some of that, of the why. Because, teams, okay, running back gets a meniscectomy, right? Okay, well, teams say, let's go out and get somebody else. Okay, now let's go out and get somebody else. Maybe let's not push this person too far. I think that what we're really facing now with Darius Geis is he does have a higher chance of tearing his ACL, generally speaking. But the thing that you look at with him is his performance metrics. He's had 2 major inside the knee, so intra-articular is what they're called, knee injuries, and the data shows production falls off, either because they have to start splitting carries, or because they physically can't do the same things they used to be able to do. But generally speaking, you don't see players come back and be the same person. Now, what the flip side is, what draft capital helps. So the higher the draft pick, the more mitigated the circumstances are, because teams will take a chance on you, A, and B, because they are generally more talented. So really, we're not looking at will Darius Geis, get re-injured, it's a possibility. That's definitely something that's in the picture. But the bigger picture is, how can Darius Geis take advantage of the likely limited snaps he'll see and volume he'll see? And when he does, will he be able to physically do it, just because of the trauma that he's put his body through at this age?
Makes me think you're saying he probably can't do it.
The odds are not in his favor. I'm not going to say the odds are against him, but there's so like, and the team situation really matters a lot too, guys. I can't emphasize that enough. Like, how much faith we have in Darius Geis, it doesn't matter compared to how much faith Washington has in Darius Geis. And if they think that moving forward, load management is the way to go with him, if that's what the medical team decides, that's what they're going to do. And until he sort of emerges from that backfield again, if he can manage to do that, that's really what we have to approach this with. He has to show us first. That's how I approach players that in guys' situations, you show me. And so I'm not really willing to take a lot of risks like that with a player like Darius Geis. But I mean, I do hope that he comes back, because dude is so talented.
Yeah. And a great guy too, because his social media is definitely. I don't follow a lot of athletes, but I definitely follow him. He's going to be a part of. We're going to be on the mental health podathon with the fantasy football face-off. Michael Hoff and Anthony Servino. Darius Geis is going to be on there with those guys, so I'll definitely be tuning in and checking that out for a great cause. So, yeah, definitely a great guy, and. Yeah, certainly hope for the best for him, especially with his football career, because it sucks seeing somebody like that so talented and just injury after injury, and can't even see the field. So, and then Gary wanted to talk about one more running back, and I'll cede to him.
My other late round stud, he's not a stud, but Jared McKinnon. So McKinnon was brought in by the Niners with what seemed to be a crazy contract at the time, really front loaded, seemed like he was going to be the perfect fit for Shanahan's offense. Tears his ACL. That was 2 years ago. And then finally seemed to be coming through his rehab, excited to see what we could do in 2019. And he tears his MCL, tears his LCL. So I'm just curious, do you think that there's even anything that you're going to be able to get from him? I think he's 28, I believe. And so he's going to put up there. Definitely not going to be, a first, second down back. He's going to be at best a third down back. But I don't know. Do you think that he's going to be able to come back at all?
I hope so. And I think that he'll be able to at least be NFL relevant. I think he'll see touches. I think he'll, play. But I don't, especially at his age, he's 28, I think going on 29. Yeah. Given, the entire circumstances that he hasn't played in an NFL game, he's in the same boat as AJ Green. Yeah. I think worse, right? I think that his first injury was in 2018, and Green actually played that 2018 before he got injured, I think. So, that's another aspect you have to think about. So can he be NFL productive? I think yes, but I don't necessarily see his body necessarily, until he proves us wrong. I don't see him defying the averages of 28 years old, several, multiple knee injuries. One of them is inside the joint. Then it sort of reoccurred. I can't see it from sort of a fantasy perspective very, very much, but I do hope he proves me wrong.
Cool.
Yeah, he hasn't played a game since week 17 of 2017. So yeah, worse than AJ Green. He's got a long layoff. So yeah, I mean, they gave him that contract, and we'll see if the Niners can get anything out of that. But any more players you want to talk about, Gary? Anybody you can think of? Or
I have a general question, actually, because I've never been able to get to talk to somebody who's so knowledgeable on the injury side of this.
Yeah.
Are there actual organizations in the NFL that you are cautious about? A lot has been said about specifically the Redskins. So, but are there other ones that you're like, yeah, that's definitely a team that I would be nervous about if I got into an injury, or is it just it's very one-off and that's just media hype?
I think there's a lot of media hype to it. I like to think that my colleagues that are PTs, ATs, especially, that's like our wheelhouse, where like a little click, and even sports med physicians. I like to think that we all are operating under, integrity. We are all doing the right thing. We're making sound choices and decisions based off of research and data. I like to think that it would be ignorant to say, that is happening across the board. So that's idealistic. But I do think that sometimes it's a little hyped up by the media, because the reality is, guys, and I'm just as guilty of it. A lot of this is just projection, because privacy laws, when coaches are ho-hum at press conferences, it is because they are trying to hide things, or don't want to give off anything that's going to tip the other team off. But it's also because of privacy laws. They're not allowed. They know privileged information. They're in a very unique position. It's not very many other employers will know your exact, medical situation. Yeah. It's a little weird when you think about it, but they're in a position of privileged information, and they're not allowed to legally say a lot because of the players are protected. So coming back to your question, sort of coming full circle, there are probably teams that maybe don't handle situations or injury situations and things like that the way that they should. But also I can't tell you any specific team or organization, has, maybe some of them are just bad luck. Maybe some of it is, like the Washington situation is sort of it was bad. I'm not saying it was good. Just sort of an anomaly. You don't see that happen very often. So I like to think that most of my colleagues are doing the right thing behind closed doors, but I don't want to. I know that I don't like if I hear another practitioner or colleague, question my decision making without talking to me about it, because they weren't in the room. They don't know the situation, circumstances. So that's why I try to stay away from saying that. But I can tell you on a positive note, the Seahawks and Philadelphia, those teams are trying extra hard. Those teams do their best to always, be up to date on all the research, and you can just tell by the things that they say. Long-winded answer, but
no. And as soon as I came out of my mouth, I was like, that was really awkward.
It's
a weird decision. And I was like, I'm going to follow up with saying which one's the positive one, which one's the good one. So
that's a fair question. It's totally fair. And if we were having a beer together, not recording, I'd say the same thing. So I understand the question, though. I totally get it.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, awesome. So, I think we're, as far as players, we got a lot of really, really good information. Really want to thank you, Edwin, for coming on. It's been a pleasure. Definitely learned a lot and lots to take in, and
I hope so.
Do some more because I want to do some more research, and like I said, go on fantasypoints.com and read his articles. He's done a lot of injury as far as AJ Green and Darius Geis and Odell Beckham, guys like that, going into their injuries and really explaining kind of the nuts and bolts of their situation. So definitely go there. It's free for now, so there's no excuse.
That's right.
Absolutely. And I just want to ask you one more thing before we hop off. So what draft slot are you in for Scott Fishbowl, and what division are you in?
Dude, I think 11. Hold on, let me pull it up. I was so mad. I was like, what the heck? How am I getting in the 11 slot here? So the divisions, I'm controlling F because I didn't remember yet. But that's the last time I checked, so I didn't know if it was. Yeah, I'm in the 11 slot, and I am in the Viewmaster League. And I have no idea what that even means.
That's the red thing with the little lever. It's got those discs with the holes.
Yeah.
You put the disc in the top. No,
I'm 27, Kevin. I'm sorry. I maybe not.
I mean, I know I'm old as hell, but shit.
No. I'm not saying you're old, but I don't know if that would.
No, you can. It's okay. It's okay. No, but yeah. So trust me, there's a lot of stuff I have no idea. That like glowworms. Like I think Scott Barrett was in that one, I believe. And I was thinking about going into a division maybe that nobody else was going to go in, but then I went with Power Rangers and Gary, what division are you in again?
Oh yeah, My Little Pony. I actually have a
I love that.
So I wanted 101, and I was like, I'm just gonna.
What slot are you guys in?
102.
Yeah, 101 for me.
Oh, you guys are the worst. I shouldn't even came on. I'm so jealous.
That's all right. We got to wait about an hour. Well, no, we probably got to wait like 6 hours for our next two picks. So
that's true. Yeah.
But yeah, we'll be on the podathon actually as soon as the drafts go live. So we'll hopefully 101 will make his pick. Gary will get to make it. I think doesn't Sal have 101 too?
I'll be still wavering. Yeah, he does.
Yeah. So you guys, I'll be waiting for you guys. I'll be sitting there, you know, because I have to go to work after that, and
Oof.
I'll be sitting there waiting for my goddamn pick, and so I can take whoever I take. Hopefully CMC drops, but
For the record, I didn't call you old. That's not what I was saying. That's my fault.
it's okay. I'm old as shit. Don't worry about it. But so this has been awesome, man. Edwin, feel free, plug everything again in case some people weren't here in the beginning, and plug away, man.
Yeah, just hit me up on Twitter at FBInjuryDoc, and then medical. Geez, I'm a medical analyst at fantasypoints.com. So go to fantasypoints.com, check out the stuff there. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
So much. It's awesome.
100%. Gary, anything else?
No, man. Thank you so much, Dr. Edwin, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be back next week. We've got Sam Holt coming on. We'll be talking some wide receivers. Should be a lot of fun. For Gary and Dr. Edwin Porras, I'm Kevin Tompkins, and thank you for checking out Fighting Chance Live. Have a great night, everybody.
See ya.